questions, and they will be sufficiently answered by Digna Gaspar. Thank you. Over to you, Digna.
Thank you, Tommy. I'll be sharing my screen. So we'll start with a short presentation. Then after that, it will be a room for questions and answers. So my name is Digna Gaspar, Innovation Officer from Open Map Development Tanzania. And today I'll be talking about state of community drone mapping. We all know that, so these are some of our agenda of what we are going to discuss. I'll start with a short introduction of what drone mapping is and what community, how are we involving community in drone activities. And then I'll be speaking a little bit of background of what are the requirements for the drone mapping. And also I'll be speaking about Open Skies Fellow, African Tech for African Data, what the fellowship is about and what activities are we doing. And the next slide will be the possibility of community drone mapping, the use cases, and how do we use inexpensive and accessible local drones. Now, as we all know that right now, the drone technology has been improving from day to day, and most of the people become aware of drones. Now, the drone mapping itself is the process of collecting hundreds of aerial images, and then like you stitch them together to make a more accurate composite image. Now, if you collect a lot of images, then these images, you'll be keeping them together by the aid of different software to make a meaningful image. Now, this image, it's most of the time, the drone activities, we normally do like survey activity or mapping activities, or in other way, we can say the process of collecting aerial image. Now, if we are doing community mapping without using drone, we'll be using some of the devices like smartphone, tablets, and the rest of equipment that can aid you in collecting information. But if we involve drone, then we have a community drone mapping. Now, in simple language, you can say that the community drone mapping can be easily said as the creation of map by and using input from local community with assistance of unmanned aerial vehicle. So we are going to involve drone in conducting survey activity or mapping activity. And then how are we going to include the community in this activity? It does not matter like the community has to have that greater knowledge of drone, but if you're doing maybe a certain activity or a certain place, if you meet people around, then you can easily engage them by telling them what activity are you going to do. And some of like in different parts of Africa, some of the places people aren't aware of drones, and some even are aware of drone, but they don't know what like drone is capable of. So what we're going to do is like giving them knowledge and giving them maybe some minor activities where people could get involved. Now, there are different kind of mapping software that have been used for long, and most of the people use Pix4D and Drone Deploy. Like these are the biggest software that most people usually use. But in other way, there are some software that there is Open Drone Map and AduPilot, where the AduPilot, it's like an open source software where a person who wants to build a local made drone can use, and it can help him or her conducting map activities in an expensive, in low cost or inexpensive, because most of software like Pix4D and Drone Deploy, there has some there are some payments you have to pay. Now, for a person who is like in a normal community where a person maybe can't afford like paying every now and then the payment fee, and then there is a pilot that can facilitate that person to know how the drone mapping is being done, and how you can plan different missions, or you can decide what activity are you going to do by using a drone. Now, for the drone mapping activities, there are some requirements that mostly a person is required to have before you go to start your activity. They differ from one country to another, but in most of East African countries, I can take it as like a use case. You find like there are some documentation where you have to prepare before you go and start your work. So like you have to like have a permission where we call a drone operations permit. In Africa, it's like a company has that authorization that they can do drone activity for a certain period of time. So that is what we call drone permission. Then you should have a licensed drone pilot. Like a licensed drone pilot, most cases is a person who undergoes certain drone training. And then that person becomes certified, and later on they are granted a license. So it's different from one country to another how the system works, but they're almost similar. Now, for case of drone registration, in most cases that you can't use a drone for like mapping activity, simply because it's a commercial activity, and then you have to register that drone. And if you're moving from one country to another, then you should have an importation permit for your drone. So these are the requirements and these requirements, like they might differ from one country to another according to the authorities, but in some way they resemble. So for the case of drone registration, there are some, this is a procedure where you have to follow, like you have to fill in an application form, and you have to like have an evidence of ownership, such as bill of sale. And also, if that drone is a manufactured drone, it's like you should have a drone specification, a document which state all the specifications that are included in your drone. And also from the registration fee differs, it depends with the country. It's not a must like you have to pay $100 USD, but it depends. The amount, it's not constant, it depends with the country. And for a license criteria in, if I take Tanzania as a use case, I might say these are the criteria that are used in Tanzania. But not only Tanzania, but every country has its own state, has its own condition. Like a person has to have at least 21 years old and should have a medical certificate that even if you have undergone certain training, you are certified. Now the process of you getting a license or being a licensed drone pilot, then you should have this criteria. And the last is the drone operations permit, where this is now the authorization that will allow you to conduct a certain mapping activity in a given community. So in order to have this drone operations permit, you should have like you should fill the application form. Then in most cases, that like if you have a company, then they know completely that that company, the certain company deals with drone activity is located in this location. Then lastly, it's the the authority normal check if you have you have all staff that are capable of conducting mapping activities, and also you have equipment to perform those operations. So in case of commercial operation, there are some criteria that you have to meet and you have to abide to them. Now, in order for Open Map Development Tanzania, Humanitarian OpenStreetMap, and Uhuru Labs came up with a project known as Open Skies Fellowship Program. This program is dedicated to youth from age of 18 and above, and we emphasize on women's. So what this project is about is the program designed to develop youth in urban setting, to give them power and responsibility to gain technical and social skills. So in a community, it's very hard to use like manufactured drone because they're expensive, but also we came up with a way that youth from the community could get access to drone and could know like if how can you build your drone from scratch, how can you make it fly, and like the whole mechanism of how do you build your drone and how do you test it. So in order to like we couldn't, if you're going to use manufactured drone, that means after that, a person will not be able to create his or her own prototype. So in order to increase capacity to youth, to have that ability, even if a person has received maybe some kind of guidance that this is how you build your drone, then after then he can use some local materials to build a local made drone that can fly. Now, our main focus for Open Skies Fellowship is a 2-year program, which we have dedicated to 3 countries, which are Tanzania, Rwanda, and Democratic of Congo. So we are going all through these 3 countries to collect youth who are interested in drone technology. And mostly we are focusing on drone technology simply because the drone technology hasn't get a widespread, but also we are looking for other technologies that can support the community as well. Now, we have 3 goals for our project, which are to develop, support, and cultivate. So as we start to speak about developing, we aim on developing the next generation of African expertise on frontier technology, and we emphasize on women as leaders, not only as participants, but also as leaders, simply because the number of women involved in drone activity is very low, and we think that there is a huge gap that needs to be filled. So we want like to increase number of women, and we're expecting maybe to have like a ratio of 70 to 30%. And the next is to support, so we're going to support the innovative and practical project in local community for social good using technology. So we are our main focus will be in drone, but also all the technologies that can bring impact or can involve the community direct, also we normal support. And lastly, we're going to cultivate the existing hubs of open data, frontier technology, and innovation throughout the region. So this is our main focus, that we have different hubs in different places whereby people aren't aware or they miss support. So what we're going to do is at least find those hubs and see how we can engage youth and encourage them to use those places for developing their own projects. Now, the following is our objectives, whereby the objective of this project is we are going to select and develop 40 Open Skies fellows over 2 years. Now, how are we going to like get the 40 youth? We are going to select a few from Tanzania, a few from Rwanda, and a few from Congo. So from there, those youth who will be selected, they will undergo like the 5-month mentorship program where they'll be exposed to technology. They'll get the technology support plus the equipment support. And also after they have completed doing their project, the project has reached to a completion, they have a task that they should at least conduct some small workshops so as they can collect at least 10 from each fellow. We expect to bring 10 other participants. So at the end of 2 years, we're expecting to have like 400 youth who are educated about technology and they know more about drone activities. And then, as I said before, like our main focus is to the community, and we are looking out on how to help community using technology. And lastly, we are going to support hubs. And how are we going to support them? It's by providing support and also the equipment that they'll be needed. Now, if we talk about the possibility of community drone mapping, we have different use cases that drone are most applicable. For example, the most common use case is land mapping, but in most cases you find a person goes with a drone in a certain place and they will conduct a survey activity. Now, if the community is around, people will always come to the place where drone is launched, simply because if you start doing your work, it will raise some attention to the people around. Now, if we can't involve the community direct, how are we going to make them as part of our activity? So sometimes it's difficult to involve them directly, but in a certain case, not we can just like providing for them some sort of education. I've ever been to a certain mapping activity where I went to a certain community, and as I started doing my work, people became surprised. So they started coming, and it was like we had parents, kids, and youth. All of them came to a place where I was doing the mapping activity. So I started to think like, how am I going to involve this community who are just staring? They don't ask questions. Some of them are even scared, but then you're supposed to do work at the same time. You're supposed to make the community feel that they are part of your activity, and that activity is going to be safe. So I started explaining like what I was doing at the moment, how I'm doing it, how is it safe, and telling them that this data that I'm collecting is going to be used for this purpose. So after that, they became aware that, okay, this is a drone and this is what it can perform. So sometimes we don't have windows for a direct involvement, but we can adjust according to environment. And then there are some other use cases that we have. Medical goods delivery, where some of the country have started implementing drones, and also we have food aid delivery and agriculture. In terms of agriculture, like most of the people used in irrigation system, or also in disease monitoring and prevention. So all of these are the applications of drone. But now, if we want to involve the community, and then we have to think of the way that if I'm going to do drone operations, how am I going to involve the community directly, or what some sort of activities that drone can participate while I'm doing the drone operation. So this is an example of Zanzibar mapping initiative, where Zanzibar is a small, it's an island located in Tanzania, where they conducted a mapping initiative using small drones for large scale mapping. So what they did is they mapped the whole of Zanzibar, and the data that was collected, it was for planning and environment monitoring. But then if we are going to use manufactured drone, then they came up with a way of how are we going to increase capacity to the community. So they involved university students, whereby the university students were trained how you can operate drone, and how you can plan your mission. So it was increasing capacity in the community directly through university students. That's how the community got involved. And now, if I talk about inexpensive and accessible local drones, till to date, we haven't really started like using a local made drone to do some mapping activity or any kind of commercial activity, simply because in order for a drone to be used to do a mapping activity, has to meet a certain requirements, and there are some policies kept by authorities. So until we reach that stage, we'll be able to use until we reach that stage is when we will be able to use local made drones. But then as Open Skies Fellowship Program, we thought that if people aren't able to use local made drone to do some really work activity, then how are we going to increase capacity to the community? Then we started conducting some different workshops from different kind of places. So we meet youth and we spend with them a week, and they get exposed to drones. So we give them some sort of introduction of what drone is, what different kind of drones are there in the market, and different kind of software that can be used. Then after that, we expose them to how to create a local made drone. So they spend time figuring out how to create a local made drone by using low-cost devices. And then after that, we get a time to go to the field so as we can test if they have succeeded to create a really flying drone. So we're in that stage where we are building capacity in that way, simply because if we can't use drones we can't use local made drone for a direct commercial activity, then we can increase capacity for the case of for learning purposes. So for Open Skies Fellow, that is how we met different youth, exposing them to drone world, and they became aware that okay, a person can really benefit, or drone can really do some more than one task. Thank you everyone for listening, and that marks the end of my presentation. So I'll invite if there is any questions.
Thank you very much, Digna, for that wonderful presentation. We have a few questions, but before we start addressing the questions, also in the webinar today, we have Ivan, who is also a member of the Open Skies Fellowship. And Ivan would like to say a word or two just to buttress on what Digna said, and then they'll both try to answer the questions.
Okay. Hey, everyone, and thank you, Digna, for the wonderful presentation. When we started setting up this this presentation, really our goal was two things. One, to give communities out there who might be interested in using drones a little picture of what's possible, and two, to give communities some idea of how they might find opportunities and get their feet on the bottom rung of the ladder using drones. So the last few years, we've seen incredible advances in drone technology, and in the last few months, actually, the Open Skies team and some of the other teams that we're involved with have made incredible strides, not so much in the high-end capacity, but in the capacity of what can be done by communities themselves. So you've seen from Digna's presentation that, women, youths, people in Africa can in fact build and fly drones, which in and of itself does a great deal for them, because I mean, to understand the technology of a drone, you have to understand at a minimum mechatronics, aeronautics, networking, image processing, programming, embedded systems, remote sensing. A drone involves an enormous number of cutting edge technologies. And if you figure them all out, if you're able to effectively, not even as an individual, even as a community, if you're able to figure out all of those things, you've really got a leg up in a lot of different things. And some of the people who've been working on drones with Open Skies have actually branched off into really low cost, high precision GPS. For example, the Open Skies team is able to do ground control points for their drone surveying with a $300 GPS machine that gives 5 centimeter GPS precision. Now, normally that's the province of multi-thousand-dollar machines. Similarly, we're working on remote sensing. Some of the people working with Open Skies are also working on using the same kind of imagery and image processing to do river flow monitoring with the camera. Normally, river flow monitoring involves putting expensive bits of equipment in the water. It can't be done during floods because it's too dangerous. But the same people working on Open Sky stuff are pointing cameras at the river and using the same software that we use to process drone imagery to estimate the water flow remarkably precisely. And that's increasingly going to be used around the continent, around the world for monitoring, as well. Flooding this year has been a big story in a lot of places in the world. So in other words, there's a great deal that we can do just in terms of human development. In terms of specific use cases for drones, there is a great deal to be done in terms of mapping. I see that some of the questions in the chat here are people saying, can we get specific areas that we'd like to map imagery? Well, the short answer is no. You can't just put in a request to the tasking manager for somebody to fly a drone. But the long answer is, if you start working together with people like Open Skies and you start empowering local communities, it's very much possible to get communities to produce drone data. And we're doing that in more and more places. And very often it's tricky and difficult, more often because of the sort of legislative requirements than because of the technical ones. But the bottom line is we've now established beyond the shadow of a doubt that local people with much fewer resources than big companies doing surveying are capable of putting together drones that can do really high quality surveying. Now, in recent months, particularly around the field of photogrammetry, which is what you do to stitch a bunch of photos together from a drone and turn them into not just an aerial photo, but also a digital elevation model. We've made great advances with the open source technology, Open Drone Map, which Digna alluded to earlier. And one of my greatest friends, Steve Mather, is the founder of Open Drone Map, and he works together with us on all of this. It's still the case that, well, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if you wanted to do a digital elevation model for a city, you had to fly, a fixed wing airplane with a pilot, with $1 million camera hanging off the bottom, and it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a good photo and aerial image of the city. That's come down substantially with the advent of things like the SenseFly EB, the fixed wing commercial drone from Switzerland, which is nevertheless $20,000. But increasingly, we're putting together the technology that allows you to do so with a small fleet of prosumer quadcopters, $1,000 Mavic or a DJI Parrot or a SenseFly Parrot, which I have actually. I've been working, in my own little village on putting together the highest quality digital elevation models possible, and stitching those together using ground control points with low cost GPS. The kinds of things that you can do if you don't have $20,000 for a drone, but you can get a few $1,000s for equipment, and you have the time and the expertise and the community to work with. So in one sense, the opportunity for communities, particularly in Africa and low income areas of the world, is that if you have expensive equipment and expensive people, you can do an interesting job, and certainly the technology is such that you can now do some pretty impressive stuff with the commercial survey grade drones. But if you have inexpensive equipment and you have communities with lots and lots of time and ability to work hard and learn, you can generate a pretty good product with a couple of $1,000 drones, or even some $500 homemade drones, as opposed to a $20,000 survey grade machine. So that's what's happening, is that the kinds of inputs that are required by people like the World Bank and development agencies and hydrologists and the people who are sort of well, to put it bluntly, the clients, the paying customers for the products that you can get out of a drone. Also cell phone companies who want mobile phone power monitoring and so forth. The ability of a community to access the equipment that obviously doesn't do the same thing at the same speed as a $20,000 machine from Switzerland, but can do the job in the hands of a skilled community, that's becoming increasingly possible. And that's always been the dream that animated Open Map Development Tanzania and Open Skies. Local people with local devices and open knowledge accessing the kinds of technology and power that has generally historically been the province of external consultants and people coming very expensively from Europe or North America with their fancy stuff and then leaving again. The neo-colonial model of aid, which I really hope that we can begin leaving behind now. So if there's the hope here has been that those of you who joined to listen to Digna wondering whether or not this was something that you can get into, the answer is yes. The technology is to the point where a community with sufficient motivation and sufficient passion and sufficient interest can learn from what Open Skies is doing and what from others in this field are doing, and get your hands on something that is well within the reach of a community, a few $1,000s as opposed to tens of thousands of dollars, and start taking back all of that technology and all of that work that can be done in our own communities that we don't need to leave as the exclusive province of well-funded companies and people with expensive equipment. So follow what Digna and her colleagues at Open Skies are doing, because there is a model here and a template for the future. To leave you with a final reflection here, Humanitarian OpenStreetMap and OpenStreetMap in general, in its first few years of existence, was very much a digital volunteering outfit where we were digitizing satellite imagery. There's only so much you can do with satellite imagery. You can look down from the sky on a 50 centimeter pixel, and you can trace buildings and you can trace roads and you can figure out a little bit about land use and so forth. But that's absolutely nothing compared to what you can do with high resolution and increasingly three-dimensional drone imagery, where the whole concept of remote mapping can be reinvented. Imagine, rather than only being able to see buildings and roads and so forth, if one set of mappers with their drones and with their cameras and their GPSs can go through an area, and then a mechanical engineer can look at the buildings, a civil engineer can look at the roads, a biologist can look at the tree species, the kinds of things that can be done with the level of detail and richness of data that we can collect with this technology could completely revolutionize the whole world of humanitarian mapping. And do so without reliance on big companies and people who own satellites and people who own hyper expensive equipment. The original ethos of OpenStreetMap, that we can do it for ourselves. This is the final link in the chain, is that the data collection from which we do all of this digitization is democratized and is in the hands of the communities where they live. Thank you again for this presentation, Digna, and I'll throw the floor open for, I'm sure there will be questions.
Thank you very much, Ivan, for buttressing on that, on those points made by Digna. And we certainly have a lot of questions that have been asked by our attendees, and we would like to pose those questions to Digna specifically to answer them. And I'll read out the questions, and then Digna will answer them accordingly. The first question we have here is, what are the basics of flying a drone? What are the points that you emphasize on when telling community members about the uses and benefits of drone mapping? Digna, can you please answer that?
Can you repeat the question?
Okay, the first one is quite simple and direct to say, what are the basics of flying a drone?
Okay. So if I'm in a community and I'm supposed to like give them a little knowledge of how to fly a drone, I will start with some safety mechanism. Simply because I don't want them to get in anyhow to get hurt and understand what are we going to do. So if I'll be the one operating the drone, I will just like give them an idea that this is what I'm going to do. And if I have a remote control with me, like I'll tell them if I put in this direction, this is what is going to happen. And this is how I'm going to do the activity. So if it's an activity that's it's a commercial activity that I'm supposed to, and I'm in the field where there is community, I'll just give them some few points on how does the drone fly, how it's landing, and how does the sticks, the different, how can I use the remote control to control the drone? So that is how I take like it's a basic kind of information that they'll get like a small idea of what is going to happen.
Thank you very much for that. We'll move on to the next question, which is from Johnny Chapman. She's asking if, like, this is her question: if we wanted to use a community drone project in Mara, Tanzania, would all the MTZ have all the necessary permits? I think this relates to having permits and to fly a drone in Tanzania.
Yes, right now the Open Map Development Tanzania has a drone operations permit that allow us to move and do different drone projects across Tanzania. So we have that permit, and that permit right now it's for 2 years long. So we can move to Mara and do a certain activity there, do it like a drone activity.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question is the Open Skies Fellowship limited to Tanzania, Rwanda, and DRC?
As we started, like it's these are the main countries that we have focused, and maybe after we have finished like the 2 years period, then we'll think that is there room to like move from apart from Rwanda, Congo, and Tanzania, what another country that we could come we could go and spread the knowledge. So right now our main focus is Tanzania, Rwanda, and Democratic Republic of Congo.
Okay, thank you very much. Ivan, I think you want to buttress on this answer. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to elaborate on that. For the moment, Open Sky specifically was generously supported by the Botnar Foundation, the Fondation Botnar in Switzerland, on the basis of a proposal to work in those 3 countries. However, the Open Skies team, an OMDTZ, and the larger humanitarian OpenStreetMap community is certainly not limited to those 3 countries. So the short answer is the only place we actually have funding to do this right now is Tanzania, Congo, and Uganda, or Rwanda, pardon me. But where we have ambitions to do it is actually everywhere there's a community that wants to. So I think with the increasing visibility and success of the Open Skies project that we have now, there is plenty of scope for expansion. But I would hate to think that it's only us and our team that could do it. There's also the African Drone and Data Academy based in Malawi. There's also the Flying Labs network that does this kind of work in many different countries. So there are lots of different ways that communities can get involved. Now, I do think that our approach is somewhat unique in that we really emphasize the hyper-localism, not just in local people flying, but local people building. That we're trying to build an ecosystem of locally produced drones, which I think is much more sustainable in the long run than importing expensive stuff from Europe. So I would like to see that model replicated, but it doesn't have to be us. So I think the real answer to this question is if you want it done outside of the countries that we're active in, give us a call. We'll advise you. We would love to help you start it up.
Thank you very much, Ivan and Digna, for that very detailed answer. Our next question is also from Jenny Chapman, and it says, it asks, why does Open Fellows only operate in urban settings? I mean, like Open Skies Fellows, why do they only operate in urban settings?
So, like, we dedicated our focus to urban settings simply because they are like the areas with large population, but we are not limited to only urban places. We can even move to rural areas, but then the challenges that we face is moving to rural areas requires maybe some of the information that you have to know, like if I'm going to do this kind of activity, maybe I can go to this hub and we can try to find a way to get youth around the places. But in urban areas, it's a lot easier than in rural areas, but we're not limited to only urban areas. We can always move, and we are trying like to create a way, like to create like a roadshow kind of a program that we could move to rural areas and do some drone demonstration. So that is what we are planning.
Okay, thank you, Digna, for that answer. We move on to our next question, which is from Sekitoleko Derek, and he's asking, is it possible to capture images from a specific area and upload them to the HOT taxing manager for mapping?
I could, for this question, I think I'll ask assistance from Ivan, and he could help me with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So the short answer is no. Open Skies is not at this moment like a free, imagery generation machine. The longer answer is, if there's an area where there's a genuine interest for imagery, and there's a community that's able to and interested in working on it, we're happy to support that. But at the moment, we don't really have the ability to simply, see a request for somebody to get drone imagery and deploy. I mean, we would love to be able to do so, but I mean, the honest truth is, where we are, it's relatively inexpensive for us to fly, because we have, the people, and we have the equipment, and we have the authorizations, which, as people have pointed out, authorizations and legislative barriers are by far the greater obstacle than the mere technical things. But for example, I mean, if you're to put a request to the tasking manager of, I need this area of South Sudan flown. Well, no, we can't just do that. That takes a great deal. If, on the other hand, you're interested in some part of of Tanzania that's not too far from Dar es Salaam, that's not too expensive for us to get to, and you make a good case for it, and even better if you can support us a little bit, sure, absolutely, we'd love to try to do that. In the long run, though, the way for this to integrate into OpenStreetMap, I mean, I see that, I think I understand the thrust of the question. What you're really asking is, how can we actually make OpenStreetMap itself more powerful by allowing more people access to good imagery in places that are important to map? And again, my answer to that is strengthen the communities. Take back the skies. The communities in these areas should be the ones gathering and creating this imagery, rather than waiting for the satellite companies. One of the things that we always said at the beginning of this is, the satellite companies make their money selling imagery, and by and large, they make their money either selling to the militaries, or they make their money by helping people find the location of the nearest Starbucks, which is not particularly commercially valuable information in a lot of rural Africa. So if we want those areas well covered, we're going to have to empower communities to do it, rather than waiting for the commercial interests that so far we've been dependent on for the imagery that we use for open mapping. So yeah, power to the communities. That's the way that we can do this.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ivan, for that, power to the communities. I think our next question has been somehow addressed by Ivan. It's asked, how can other countries be part of this project? So, Chomba, as Ivan stated earlier on, you can get in touch with them, the Open Skies, and try to see how you can kickstart a similar fellowship where you are. And our next question is also from Janet Chapman. It says, can rural women and girls get involved in any way?
Yes,
Dig-
simply because our motto is to emphasize women's, then we would love to engage a lot of women and girls. And we are open to that. So we can communicate and see how we can keep this moving.
Thank you very much, Digna, for that. And our next question is from Shoaib, and he's asking, how can we ensure transfer of knowledge across different communities? I think it's a double-barrel question, and it goes on to say, is there a central place where there might be an introductory or to advanced level, like a platform where you can access all the information, tutorial or something like that?
So we normally have some few videos where we normally share in our YouTube channels, but we are still thinking on a way of developing a sort something like a curriculum where a person could refer what has to be done from the beginning to the end, but still we haven't like put it for people to start using it. But there is African Drone and Data Academy where they provide different drone trainings, and they normally share some resources. So if a person wants to start getting involved as soon as possible, then he could visit African Drone and Data Academy website, and there are some curriculums where they normally share.
Okay, thank you very much, Digna, for that. We go to the next question, which is from Usunga Michael, and he's asking, do you co-design the UAV applications with the community?
No, we don't design the UAV applications with the community, but what we're doing is we are emphasizing on the use of open source software, the software that a person can easily download and use. So most of the time we normally use Pilot. That is the software that we normally use, which is open for everyone.
Okay, and thank you very much, Dina. Our next question is from Frankie Anderson, and they are asking, is there any code of ethics to follow before testing UAV in the field?
Yeah, so there are some rules where you have to ensure that your UAV is safe, and there are some sort of calibration to test and see if everything works fine. So we normally have some devices to test different kind of equipment before we take them in the field and start flying a drone. So there are some guidelines that we have, like we have to check, and we have to ensure that the equipment that are connected properly before we go, we start using the UAV.
Okay, thank you, Digna. Ivan, your hand is up. Can you please also buttress on that answer?
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that the genesis of the Open Skies project was actually when Digna and a few of us attended the Lake Kivu Challenge that was held by the World Bank in Rwanda. And one of the things that we noticed, there was a gentleman, David, who was doing the safety assessments, and there was teams from all over the world. There were people with $100,000 hydrogen-powered drones there. And every drone had to go through a safety assessment before they'd be allowed to fly at that event. And Born Love and Digna and William and I brought our bamboo drone, the drone that we had manufactured in Tanzania by ourselves. And the safety scrutineer said, "You had the best safety program. We had what the professional, this was a guy who worked in aviation his entire life, and as a retiree took up scrutineering for drone projects." So, and how did that happen? Well, basically because when you're building your own drone, you're really actually paying attention to what you're doing. You really do want to avoid getting your face chopped up by the propellers. You really do want to avoid hurting people or losing your drone. And the principles are just the same as any other professional activity. You just do a hazard assessment and you write a procedure to check them all. And the aviation world has enormous, beautiful, wonderful checklist-based procedures. There's other than maybe surgery. I can't think of an industry that has more clear and concise and well thought out safety protocols. And we've adapted those, and the drone world in general has adapted those. Drones are inherently risky. I remember flying one time and reassuring everyone in the audience, don't worry, it's no more dangerous than any other upside down lawnmower flying around the room without any guards on the blades. I mean, a drone itself is like full of like really fast moving spinning parts. So the way you make it safe is with protocols, and those protocols, like aviation protocols, when properly applied, are really good and they really work. And it's not only a technical obligation, but it's an ethical obligation to teach those as part and parcel of the whole thing. So as Digna mentioned earlier, the first thing that we teach people when they come in for drone trainings or drone workshops or whatever with Open Skies is all the safety protocols. It's baked right in. It's foundational to the whole setup. I think you're still muted, Tommy.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Ivan and Digna, for those in-depth answers. Our next question, I think, is related to a project you implemented in Zanzibar, and this person is asking, approximately how many UAVs were used in the Zanzibar mapping project?
So the Zanzibar mapping project, it was a project that was prepared by Zanzibar Commission of Land, and they used the university student from Zanzibar. So I wasn't like direct involved, but I also take it as a use case on how the community got involved through that mapping initiative. So as for now, it's hard for me to tell like how many UAV were there, simply because I wasn't directly involved in the project. But there is like a website where it speaks about the Zanzibar Mapping Initiative. There is a website which provides all sort of information, but they only provide the information that how the data was collected and for what purpose they wanted to use that data. So it's hard for me to tell right now like how many exactly UAV were used and the costs for the whole project.
The World Bank bought 10 EBs for that project, and I think there might be one or two that still work. So yeah, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of Swiss-made drones that were originally bought for the Zanzibar mapping project, and not much left of it. I'm glad they did it. I don't think it was a failure. I think it was a great project and a great initiative. But honestly, $20,000 EBs is not the way to go in our environments. We should be using much more local and much less expensive equipment.
Thank you, Digna and Ivan, for those answers. And our next question is from Eric Asunga, and he is asking, like, after mapping the communities using drone, are the aerial images freely available for others to use?
So it depends with an activity that is carried out. If that project is dedicated to the community, and then they normally provide, like if they create some maps, those maps normally go direct to community leaders. But then the problem happens that the community leader might have the aerial images, but they don't have a person who can use. So that is one place that the image gets stuck. You find people collect aerial image, but when they send to community leader thinking that the community is going to benefit, it happens to be there is no a person who has capacity to use that image.
Okay, thank you. That's clear enough. And to buttress and also I think for in-depth information, Frankie Anderson is also asking if the images where they like these local leaders, how can they be accessed? Like where the images, the UAV images can be accessed. Is it from are they available on the website for the Zanzibar mapping, or they have to get directly in touch with local leaders?
Mm, I think simply because the Zanzibar mapping initiative was carried by Zanzibar Commission of Land, which it's like an organization, the government organization dealing with land. That means if a person wants to use those images, has to consult them.
Okay, thank you very much. And Walter KB is asking for the style a statement like, in many countries, the regulatory environment is extremely difficult to get authorization to fly. Is there any effort to streamline the regulatory issues surrounding all aspects of drone operations? Ivan, can you please start with this one?
Yeah, this is a problem. I've mentioned it a couple of times already on this call. Basically, the regulatory environment is a problem. There are two issues. One is that drones actually are inherently, safe unless properly, not safe unless properly used. So there's a good reason to have strict regulations to make sure that drone use is controlled and not willy-nilly. The second problem is that there are entrenched interests. There are big companies and moneyed interests who don't want competition from local drones, and so there are large companies that invest substantial amounts in convincing governments, local governments in Africa and elsewhere, that what they actually need is, for example, to say only these particular brands of Swiss-made or US-made drones are considered safe. And there are also people with a strong interest in gatekeeping the drone licenses. For example, there some of the people who are supposed to be assisting the communities to be able to access drone technology are also selling licensing courses for $3,000, which is the opposite of when they're also advocating to the government that that particular course that only they are allowed to give is the only way to become licensed. They're not actually helping the community, they're blocking the community. So there is that in some cases we're actually working against the tide of certain interests. Now, we've discussed a couple of solutions. Obviously, the first one is to just demonstrate that we can do it safely. So hopefully the example that we're setting in Tanzania and Rwanda and DRC shows that communities can use drones responsibly, and hopefully that can be used as an advocacy point to persuade various governments that they should have an inclusive regulatory regime. Ultimately, it's nominally in the interest of these governments to allow their own citizens to be competitive with foreigners. If you're the government of Botswana, why would you want it to be only Swiss people who come in and fly drones in your country? Why would you not want to set up a regulatory environment that supports the Botswanan drone industry? This doesn't seem to be an argument that has prevailed in many places just yet. So the second avenue that we're thinking is more strategic, and we're still shopping around for support for this. The idea of a drone association, whereby there's a larger association, an international association that carries out some of that lobbying, but also functions as an association that just like the big companies can afford to have the licensing and the insurance and the compliance and the manuals for their airframes and so forth, an association across international association that assumes some of that actually handles some of the negotiation, that handles some of the insurance, and that people can join for a modest fee, join for $100 a year, and then you're part of the organization and you're allowed to fly as long as you meet that association's guidelines and safety protocols and so forth. That's based on the American Model Aeronautic Association. That's what we used to just call model airplanes. Now we call them drones. But I've been a member of that since I was a little kid. I paid my, I don't know, I think it was $40 a year or something like that, such that I could go to any flying field in Canada or the United States that was approved by that association. And as long as I had paid my $40 and I adhered to the rules of that association, I was covered as a pilot with, it was legal for me to fly and there was insurance applied to me. And that model of an association, I know there are a few people on the line who are from, you know, larger agencies that have budgets and mandates to work on these kinds of things. I reiterate again, to help these communities function in these incredibly onerous regulatory environments, we need a coordinated approach, and we need support from people who have leverage in the halls of legislative power. So this is an unsolved problem that we can't solve on our own. We need solidarity from the rest of the sector and the rest of the communities out there. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ivan. I think that's a very brilliant idea, because we have individuals within some communities that are self-taught drone pilots, but they can't participate or implement drone-related projects because they do not meet the necessary standards or do not have their license to operate. Thank you very much for that. I'll move on to the next question, which is from Ralph, and he's asking, during the course of the training, I mean the Open Sky Fellowship, during the course of the training, do you include both the actual capturing of images and the compilation of images? Basically, it's asking the stitching up of images in one session, or are they done on separate sessions? Like, what's the format of training?
So we don't include like the image processing in the 1 week training, simply because it's a short time, and the main aim for us to keep all the youth in one place for a period time of 1 week. It's like to look for those who have that passion with technology. So it's not like we're going to support all of the people, but if we are going to provide like a training, it's going to be a basic training, simply because it will be like a screening process, whereby for those who like show the real interest is when now we reach out to them, and they become like they benefit from the mentorship program. So the training there like for everyone, but then how many people are they going to benefit? It depends with the person and the capability of a person, him or herself. So that is a different session where a person could get a time to deep dive into different kind of software and be exposed. But as for a 1 week, we only do like basic of drone itself, without including the image processing part.
Okay, thank you very much, Digna, for that answer. I think there is a question from Usunga Michael again, and I think this question relates to both Open Skies and the HOT. So any representative from both communities can answer this question. But I'm asking because it relates to drones and LiDARs. So he's asking, has HOT done any projects on use of LiDAR sensors as opposed to the use of the so many available multispectral sensors, sorry. If so, how can such LiDAR sensors be made available for use to a wider community? I think Ivan wants to jump on this. Can you please answer it, Ivan?
LiDARs are horribly expensive. So the short answer is no. The original impetus for really developing the photogrammetry, which is creating the 3D, by taking multiple photos with lots of overlap and then calculating the depth by matching features and working out the angle from each camera angle to the surface, was because though you can get a LiDAR ball for $80,000 and hang it off of a really expensive drone or helicopter or airplane, that's really not feasible for local communities. It's even difficult for Western consultants because those things are expensive. They attract a lot of attention at customs. They're very delicate. So at first, in Tanzania, we actually did some, comparison between an $80,000 LiDAR unit and our photogrammetry. And definitely the LiDAR had an edge in quality, but it was also, 7 or 8 times as expensive. And that's, even compared to just the EB, let alone starting to talk about our more local style of drones. So, for the state of the art as it's been for the last couple of years, LiDAR is awesome and incredible, but really expensive and out of reach. One of our, Uhuru Labs actually has a LiDAR unit, which is very expensive and is used for some commercial stuff. And so there's some possibility for Open Skies fellows to get some experience using LiDAR. There are a few LiDAR units which are coming down in price. Nowadays, you can get something around the $1,500 mark, which has enough range that you can do something on a drone in certain circumstances, and it has enough beams. I mean, if you just have the regular LiDAR that you can buy on Alibaba has like a 2-meter range. It's good for putting on a drone for like landing sensor to know how close you are to the ground when you're about to land, so you don't hit too hard. But it's not good for mapping. To do mapping with LiDAR, you need something that spins around really fast and fires out like hundreds of beams every second to gather points all over the place to create a full map. And those traditionally have been really expensive. The people who are developing self-driving cars are pushing the price down of those. So the long answer, I guess I've already gone on pretty long about this. I expect within the next couple of years that we will start poking into LiDAR, because there are going to be some LiDAR units that are coming down in price enough that they'll edge into the range of what we can actually put on the kinds of drones that we're operating with. But that's not happening just yet, and I wouldn't expect it to start for the next, until at the earliest sometime in late 2022, just based on the progress of, the products that are showing up in the testing pipeline for LiDAR. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ivan, for that. We hope LiDARs can be easily accessible and at a cheaper cost here in Africa. So we move on to the next question, which is also from Janet Chapman. So Janet is asking, I think specifically to Digna, and she's asking, how much will it cost to do a drone training in Mara? I guess this is in Tanzania.
So I can't really.
An approximate cost might suffice, I guess.
Yeah.
Or maybe,
so.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I think I can't put the approximate cost, simply because maybe the only cost that will be from us is the cost of moving from where we are, where our offices are located, to Mara, and we have some equipment which we can carry them with us to Mara and do the drone training. So for more detailed information, I think I can chat with Janet Champman and see how we can move forward with it.
Yes, the webinar is getting more interested, and the questions are coming in fast. So we according to my co-moderator here, and we are saying, if you want to speak or you want to ask a question live, you can type H in the comment section, and then you will be given the chance. So we'll move on again to the next question, also by Janet, and she's asking, I think, now that we have the opportunity for everybody to participate in making a statement or answering a question, this is open to everyone on the floor. But nevertheless, Digna and Ivan, please continue answering the question until someone pops up. She's asking, has anyone here done any drone work on measuring reforestation or carbon capture?
I know of some people doing this in Asia, in Indonesia, but I don't know about anybody doing it. We're not doing it. I don't know of anyone doing it in Africa at this very moment. It's a good use case, but it's just not one that we've been working on so far.
Okay, so there's a statement from Bow Percival, which is uploading data to Open Area Map will also be a way to do that. So I think the collaboration between Open Skies and HOT, did you ever think of utilizing the Open Area Map tool by HOT during the course of your projects?
Open Aerial Map is great, and it's really good in principle. We do upload data to it, but to be blunt, Open Aerial Map needs a little work. It needs a little tender loving care because it's been down quite a lot lately, and it's been difficult to upload to. So yeah, Open Aerial Map is certainly our preferred platform to upload our drone data to. But yeah, it needs a little work. So again, to anybody who might be out there in funding agencies, that would be really helpful if we could give Open Area Map a little makeover. Over.
Okay, thank you very much, Ivan, for that answer. So for the questions to keep coming in, we have started this thread in the community working group forum to collect questions. We'll make sure Digna and Ivan of Open Skies Fellow be able to answer. So the link is in the chat section. You can check it out and then ask your questions there. So is there any other question? Let us, so we can continue. Do we have more questions? Okay, so while we wait for more questions, Walker KB, can you please speak now? You have the floor.
Thank you. So I was curious if there's any integration with aerial robotics or flying labs or any of the other organizations that are doing similar efforts. Over.
Thank you, Walker, for that question. Ivan, over to you.
So actually, Flying Labs in Tanzania has also been funded by Botnar. We have been coordinating them with them as best we can. Between us and the Flying Lab, there's a certain amount of complementarity because Flying Lab's emphasis is on training of piloting, and our emphasis is on generating, an industry of like locally produced and locally operated drones. So while there's obviously overlap, there really is a significant difference in that. And Flying Labs is heavily sponsored by the Swiss drone manufacturers. They're very much into proprietary drones and proprietary technology, and we are not. And there's been good collaboration in some senses. There's also been some tension between us and the Flying Labs in terms of who are the gatekeepers for licensing. And the Flying Labs is, they've got a very sensible and very laudable interest in ensuring that drones are safe and that the licensing procedures are sound. But we're not persuaded that $2,000 US is the right price for an African community member to pay to become licensed as a drone pilot. So that's been a point of some discussion between us. That being said, there is one other organization with which we've coordinated much more closely, and that's the African Drone and Data Academy, which is more or less based in Malawi and has been funded by UNICEF and is really closely aligned with us. They've helped us a lot. We've helped them. We've exchanged a lot of information, and somehow that's just turned out to be a more natural fit. That being said, we do absolutely support the Flying Labs and absolutely work with the Flying Labs, but they're, it's not always a perfect fit.
Okay, thank you very much, Ivan. I think cross collaboration with the other drone communities or drone organizations will actually increase the success of the Open Skies Fellowship and also improve the drone landscape here in Africa. And it's welcoming to know that you've been collaborating with the Open Drone and Data Academy in Malawi. That's wonderful, and hopefully during our next session we'll have someone from that community that'll be making a presentation. So we have less than 8 minutes. Is anyone part of this call that would want to make a statement or question? Okay, I think we've learned enough for today. So I think we've learned enough for today. A lot of people are actually following up on what we've been saying, and we hope some of the things that have been learned will be replicated in our communities. And as Ivan stated earlier on, if you are here and interested to work, if you're here and you're interested to be a member or start an Open Skies Fellowship in your country or in your community, you can get in touch with them, and then you can start one in your community. So we have another webinar like this, which is going to happen on the 17th. And I guess if you've registered already for this one, you'll receive a link for you to be an attendee for the next program. Okay, thank you everyone. So this is our next our program for the next drone webinar, the Power to Fly drones. It's going to be very wonderful because we'll be having Taichi Furuhashi from MAP Congia and Crisis Mapper Japan. We'll be having Ndapile Nku, and Ndapile happens to be the African drone from the African Drone and Data Academy. And we're going to have Hestel Winsemios, who's also from Rainbow Sensing. I'm starting that is going to be a great session, and we hope everybody will join. So once again, from the HOT community, the community working group, HOT, and also from the Open Skies team, want to say thanks to Digna and Ivan for attending and making great presentations. And we hope to see everyone on our next webinar, and also your questions and participation will highly be appreciated. Thank you all, and I would like to say this, we come to an end of this webinar.
Hi, thank you everyone. If you would like to have like a group photo, we can do that. Just yeah, just turn on your videos. Yeah. So yeah, please freeze in 1, 2. Oh, okay. Let's wait. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I'm seeing more coming in on video. One last call. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Smile. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Digna and Ivan, and also Tommy for being our host today. Very wonderful speakers. Hopefully to see you again next week.